We are going to make dumplings and steam buns. In Chinese, dumplings are called jiaozi, and steam buns are called baozi. For the filling, 3 pounds of ground pork, 1 whole head of Chinese cabbage, also called napa, 1 bunch of scallions, 1 bag of raw shrimp, 3 bunches of cilantro, rice noodles, and for the seasoning we had salt, pepper, oyster sauce, rice wine, ginger, garlic, sugar, sesame oil. For the steamed buns, 1 packet of yeast, flour, warmed milk, sugar, 1 egg, oil, a dash of salt. Dumpling wrapper dough is much simpler. It is just flour and water. So total we made maybe 100 baozi and 150 dumplings. This is 1 bunch of scallions or green onions. It's washed and I'm chopping it into small bits, about 1/4 inch. I add it to the meat. George is meticulously taking the leaves off of cilantro. Here is 1 bag of raw shrimp. I shell it, and even though it says it's already deveined, I like to devein it even more. I chop the shrimp to about the same size as the scallions. Not minced. You just want to roughly chop it. And add that to the meat. I add rice noodles. I don't want to cook it for too long, otherwise it will be kind of mushy in the filling. I take the napa and I wash each leaf and kind of let it dry. Ginger, I peel it. I prepare the garlic, and together ginger and garlic goes into the food processor. I roughly chop the rice noodles and add it to the filling. I start seasoning the filling when it's just the meat in there. I like to add oyster sauce. This is about 1.5 cups. Nothing is exact. I just kind of guesstimate on a lot of things. Salt, maybe a tablespoon. Soy sauce, maybe 2 tablespoons, maybe more. Sugar, that's maybe 2 tablespoons. I like to add sesame oil. It adds a nice aroma. I add rice wine. This is about 1/2 cup. And ground pepper. I like to grind the pepper fresh. I start mixing it. Oops, the meat is still a little frozen. But that's okay. Now it's time to use the food processor to chop up all the vegetables. Here's the cabbage, or Chinese cabbage, napa. Cut it into smaller pieces to fit into the food processor. And let it get chopped up fine. And add it to the meat mixture. Here's the ginger. The garlic is already in there. and use the food processor to chop it up and add it to the meat mixture. After you mix it, you add in the cilantro. And I do an extra step. I take a little bit of the filling and boil it up so that I can taste test it to see if I have enough seasoning in there. If it's bland, I add more seasoning.
Good. I think that's good.
I taste it, and so far this batch is pretty good. I like to put it in the fridge overnight. This is not necessary, but I find that the flavor gets infused into the filling more. Now, on to baozi dough, or steamed bun dough. You want to warm up the milk, add 1 packet of yeast, 4 cups of flour, about 2 teaspoons of sugar,
And a little bit of salt.
1 teaspoon of salt. Mix all the dry ingredients up first. 1 egg.
Guesstimate.
About 2 tablespoons of oil. Again, this is not an exact science.
And this is warmed up milk. It's about 12 ounces, probably a little less.
Mix it as you go to see the consistency of the dough. And once the dough can form a nice ball, you start to knead it. I knead it for about 5 minutes. And you can feel at the end of 5 minutes that the dough is nice and smooth. I put it in a bowl with flour, and I put flour on top of the dough, and I put a damp paper towel over it. I put it into an oven that's heated to the lowest temperature and let it rise for about 1 to 2 hours. For the baozi, with the amount of filling that I made, I will be repeating this process 3 more times for a total of 4 batches of baozi. In the meantime, as the baozi dough is rising in the oven, I am going to make the dumpling dough. The dumpling dough is much simpler. And here I have 4 cups of flour, and I will add about 2 cups of water. Again, it's not exact. You add water as you go and get it to a consistency where you can start kneading it without it sticking to your hand. And this I also knead for about 5 minutes. And then I start rolling it into long logs. I like to cut it into portions just so that I can keep track of how many I'm making. Each 1/4 portion will make about 30 dumpling wrappers. So you get it to be about this long log, and you start cutting it into small pieces. And this will cut into about 30 pieces. And for each piece, I roll it into a ball and put it into my bowl. There's flour in the bowl, and you kind of flour the balls as you go. Now I take out the filling. I like to take out a small portion at a time and put the filling back in the fridge. Okay, here are the balls for the dumpling wrappers. I like to flour the pan so the dumplings don't stick to the pan. Take the ball and start rolling the edges. And you like to keep the center a little thicker because when you fill the dumpling, the center is where all the liquid will concentrate, and you want that center to be thick enough so that it doesn't break. I misplaced my rolling pin. It was a nice wooden rolling pin. And when I discovered I didn't have my rolling pin, I went and found a PVC pipe that we had around the house and cut it into the right size so I can use it as my rolling pin. To fill the dumpling, you take about a spoonful of filling. You don't want too much filling. You don't want to overfill your dumpling, otherwise it won't wrap as well. Squeeze the top together and then squeeze the bottom two edges together, and then you have two ears on top that you flatten. And then squeeze it. The whole idea is to secure it so that the fillings won't fall out. And those dumplings I will put in the freezer to freeze so that after they are frozen, they can be put into Ziploc bags. Now we are going on to the baozi. It has risen nicely. This is my steamer, which I have parchment paper pre-cut for each tray. I take out the dough. Once you have this dough, you don't want to knead it much more. I'm rolling it into a log so that I can cut it into the portions for the baozi wrapper. For the baozi wrapper, I'm just using my hands to thin out the edges to the size of my hands, and then I fill it with the same filling as the dumplings. Of course, you can have different fillings for baozi, but I use the same fillings for both my dumplings and my baozi. You take one end and you start to crimp the edges together, all the edges together, until you get it to the center so that you can close it up and cinch it into a nice round cinch. I flour the bottom just a bit. You don't want to overflour it, but to flour the bottom, this way it will not stick to the parchment paper. After all the baozi are made, I put damp paper towel over them and let it sit for another 15 to 20 minutes. In the steamer, I have water boiling. That's one layer. Here's the second layer. My mom gave me this steamer, and I love it. I'm not sure where she got it from. She doesn't remember. But of course, you can have bamboo steamers as well.
Okay, let that steam for about 20 minutes.
In the meantime, we will cook our freshly made dumplings. Freshly made dumplings taste so much better than frozen ones. Here's cooked fresh dumplings.
Oh, should we make the sauce to make it?
Here's George making the sauce for the dumplings. Soy sauce, vinegar, sesame oil. You can make it even more fancy by adding minced garlic. Yum.
Good?
The baozi are done. They've been steaming for about 15 to 20 minutes. And now you take it out. I like to put them on their sides just to avoid the leaking through the bottom. And you let that cool.
Second batch.
Once it's cooled, you can store it away in Ziploc bags. Now to eat the fruit of your labor. That's it. It's delicious.
There's things that happen outside your control, and you just have to be at peace with that.
It's very good.
In this space for sure. With my life, I was allowed to have this amount of time by myself to do life.
Yeah.